Hello and welcome to the Two Mats podcast, brought to you by the subscribers of the New European.
Fine people.
It's a Thursday evening.
It is.
And we are reeling from another normal week in Trump world.
Another normal day in the office in Trump world. And I think we should cut to the chase and have a blast of what Trump said standing beside Bibi Netanyahu on Tuesday in the White House about Gaza.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply.
Okay, well, that's a slightly different approach to anything anyone's ever suggested in the world before, including Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about out of the blue.
Well, actually, I mean,
Go on.
We should go back to the content because there's quite a lot of content to discuss. But I think one of the slight cul-de-sacs is people have said that he was busking it. It was out the blue. It was kind of, but there had been some breadcrumbs.
Go on.
Okay, well, not a huge number, but in October, he said that Gaza could be made to be, quotes, better than Monaco. Immediately after his inauguration in January, seems a long time ago, he said it's a phenomenal location on the sea, best weather, everything's good. It's like some beautiful things can be done with it. And of course, there's the famous Jared Kushner last year, his son-in-law, who was Middle East envoy in his first term, saying that he believed there was great waterfront property potential. And Kushner said, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. Yeah. So this idea had obviously been doing the rounds I suspect in the family rather than in the administration. And what that then came into was there were actually two moments with Netanyahu. There was one in the Oval Office where they do a quick press pool call, and then there was the proper press conference. And if you sort of join together all the bits, it's pretty clear how radical what he's suggesting is. So the various phrases leap out. A long-term ownership position for the United States in Gaza. He wants to, quote, resettle people permanently. Yeah. That's 2.2 million Gazans. I don't think people should be going back to Gaza. He wants to find them a beautiful alternative that's safe. He wants them resettled in areas and then in a different context, various domains. Yeah. He wants to build a riviera of the Middle East. And when asked about whether this would involve US troops, he conspicuously and clearly said, we'll do what is necessary.
Yeah. So can we say huge? Can we say the big things or the things I think are really big but haven't been said enough because people are distracted by the kind of grand sweep of his quote unquote vision for Gaza? He is describing nothing short of ethnic cleansing, of illegal deportation of millions of people
from their homes.
It is, if you were a Palestinian listening to Donald Trump talking, you would just think the world seriously does not give a fuck about my existence, wouldn't you?
I think that this is. I mean, we can let's because you're right. We should look at it first of all in terms of the Middle East and the people, right? The Palestinian people, rather than starting with Trump. Okay,
well, and Matt, let me just clarify why I think that's important, because the reaction in the newspapers the day of, we all woke up to this news in the UK, and while he was slumbering in the White House, the whole world was going berserk about what he'd just said, and the newspaper front pages in the UK were all about Trump's vision for Gaza, the new Riviera and all of it. And that seemed to be, he seemed to do what he always does, which is capture attention with this absolute mad fantasy. But the real damage and the catastrophe of what he's saying and the implication of what he's saying is kind of lost within the sort of bizarre nature of how he's communicating.
He's talking about the forcible relocation, forcible displacement, ethnic cleansing, whatever you want to call it, of 2 million Gazans from their home. Yeah. Now, there was an inevitable fudging of whether he meant permanent or temporary. Yeah. Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, said he meant temporary. Marco Rubio Secretary of State said it meant temporary, and rather pathetically said it was time to make Gaza beautiful again, which was a desperate attempt to suck up to the boss.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, this is an incredibly irresponsible, wicked intervention in the Middle East, which at any time would be those things. But let us not forget what that time is. I mean, we're actually in the middle of phase one of an incredibly intricate, tightly geared ceasefire.
Yes, which ends quite shortly.
Right. We're in phase one, started on January the 19th and expires on March the 1st.
Yeah.
18 hostages have come out so far in return for a bunch of Palestinian prisoners. The idea is that 33 come out during this phase. Then the next phase begins on March the 1st, and then the third and final phase begins on April the 12th. And as we've discussed on the podcast before, this ceasefire, which Trump took a lot of credit for, and to be fair, you know, he did play a part in its...
He was certainly a catalyst, wasn't he?
He was a catalyst for its conclusion.
Yeah.
But there is so much that can go wrong with it.
Yeah.
Okay? And what he has done here is basically drive an 18-wheel truck through that. Because what he said is, okay, fine, you've got all that, but the Gazans have to leave Gaza.
Yeah.
And America is going to own Gaza, whatever that means, because, I mean, for a start, good luck finding out who actually owns the territory of Gaza, because about 5 different entities claim ownership of it, but leave that aside. You know, this is obviously horrific and unjust towards the people of Palestine, right?
Yeah.
It immediately imperils the remaining hostages in Gaza. It is a huge boost to Hamas and to the extreme right in Israel, who don't want the ceasefire to continue.
I noted that the ultra-Orthodox Jews, the settlers, said that Trump was a messenger from God.
Right.
You know.
But I mean, also, Hamas, having been, given, seriously degraded, and the Iranian proxy regimes all over the Middle East being on the floor, and Netanyahu being told by Trump, take the win. Yeah. Hamas now suddenly has the greatest recruiting sergeant it's had in decades.
Well, as if they needed one, but
but hang on. This is, I mean, I agree with you, but as it were, if the consequence of the conflict had been that we were heading, albeit slowly, towards a two-state solution, right? There would have been something. Yeah. Now, I mean, one thing you can take to the bank. There is going to be no progress at all on the two-state solution until at the earliest January the 20th, 2029, when Trump leaves office. It's dead. It's over.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's dead.
Trump does have a two-state solution in mind. It's just that the two states are Israel and the United States.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, the basis of American policy since, arguably since the formation of Israel, but certainly since Jimmy Carter's Land for Peace with Begin and Sadat, Clinton's Oslo Accords, Bush tried, the two-state solution has been the absolute basis of American policy in the Middle East.
Trump has tried previously the Abraham Accords.
Well, this is. I mean,
it's so contradictory. It
is contradictory because the next thing that he wanted was to bring Saudi in and make a deal between Saudi and Israel, and it was discussing a multi-$100 billion investment in the US with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, right?
Right.
And Saudi immediately and completely predictably said, well, the deal's off. We've made it perfectly clear that we're not going to cut a deal with Israel until the two-state solution is on the table. Yeah. So he's actually self-harming here, quite apart from everything else.
The thing that strikes me as well as being incredibly damaging is the level of disrespect he's shown to this problem, to treat it just like it was a property development application.
Yes.
And that is, I think, we were talking just before we started recording. He does see the world as one big, massive planning application.
I mean, it's a very strange aspect to this current administration is that Elon Musk sees everything as a tech company that must be disrupted.
Yeah.
He sees the federal government as a tech company. He sees Britain as a tech company.
Yeah.
He sees Germany as a tech company. Donald Trump sees the entire world as just one big area of real estate.
Yeah.
And the way he was talking about the Palestinians with this kind of deranged tone was not as people who've been through 7 kinds of hell, but as prospective tenants in a sort of big Trump village somewhere or not. I mean, he was very muddled by that because he said he wanted the new Gaza, as it rose from the ashes, to be a place where, for what we call one world. There was kind of, ridiculous notion. And he said it could include Palestinians, but clearly what he meant was...
that's big of him, yeah.
No, yeah, but also he meant high-value tenants,
He wants it to be like Dubai.
He wanted to be like
That's
Dubai.
his vision.
Or Monaco.
Or Atlantic City.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you've ever been to Atlantic City, it's a shithole, by the way.
Absolutely.
But, which he is largely responsible for, one of the most tasteless architects on the planet. Awful. I thought it was a very striking juxtaposition on Radio 4 the morning that the news broke, where we had this, unexpurgated display of fantasy development on a global scale from Donald Trump. Then they had an interview with Barry Hearn. Right, about how he was good. Barry Hearn was reinventing darts and snooker and sport. And I thought, I know Barry and I love Barry. He's an absolute genius, but I don't want Barry Hearn to be the prime minister of this country. But that's what the world is now. We've got a Barry Hearn style character who sees things just as massive deals, huge deals to be done. And everything is about the deal, the art of the deal. And it takes no account of the humanity that's involved, or the history,
or the difficulty and the lethality of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I mean. The absolute consequences.
Obviously, I think what he said about Greenland and the Panama Canal and Canada and some of the things he's done with the tariffs, all the deal making and swaggering is ridiculous, right? But this is not in the same bucket at all. And it's really important that, because I can already hear in the way it's being covered and read in the way it's being covered, we're getting back to that kind of, don't take him literally.
Yeah.
Well, on some things maybe, right? But we can't afford not to consider that he means this.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the Middle East, when you're talking about the politics of a ceasefire, when you're talking about the most dangerous place on earth, what a US president says really, really matters. What they say, not even what they do, but what they say.
Yeah.
It has immediate consequences. And, it will have, for instance, I guarantee, and with some, informed guesswork, that security services all over the world will have been extremely edgy after this, because, of course, it makes the likelihood of a terror attack that much likelier.
Yes. Because
what has happened now in one press conference is that Trump has said there's not going to be a two-state solution. And maybe there's not even going to be a Palestinian entity at all, because another thing which has been underreported is that he was asked about the West Bank and he sort of said, well, we'll get to that. So he wasn't even able to say, oh, well, the West Bank is for the Palestinians.
Yeah.
So where we're at now is a very, very dangerous moment.
Yes. And I think, as hard as it is to strip out the specifics of this announcement, one of the most chilling aspects of the whole thing is about the character of Donald Trump, which, again, we've talked about time and time again, but this is possibly the most stark illustration of why he's so dangerous, is his lack of consideration and his absolute propensity for what is now being euphemized as thinking outside of the box.
Or disruption.
Or,
yes.
All of these kind of things that are fine at an entrepreneurial VC level, right? You're starting a new tech business, great. But when you're trying to solve the insoluble problem of the Middle East and you've got a guy who's just spitballing, whether it's spitballing that's taken place within the confines of his inner circle for a few months and now it's just emerged, or whether my theory, and I know we don't quite see eye to eye on this. My theory is, I bet you it might have been like Boris Johnson's 2 columns, and he just rolled out of bed that morning and thought, "No, I really do want to go with this." And
I don't think that's inconsistent with what I'm saying either.
Yeah, great. But my fear, not my fear, my like deep depression about Donald Trump is the level of whimsy that he could apply, not just to the Middle East, but to anything in the next 4 years.
That, but also that there is a completely different mindset to statecraft. So, for example, I mean, we were talking about this just before we started recording, but since the war, and fair play, we Europeans, other parts of the world, have relied too much on this. The idea that America was the crucial, indispensable nation in all the liberal international institutions that were formed after the war.
Yeah.
Because, as it were, when that setup was being founded, it never occurred to the founding fathers, as it were, that there would be an entirely unpredictable maniac in the White House.
Yeah.
And we've never really thought of, what would happen if America pulled out the UN, or it became impossible for the G7 to operate without America,
or NATO fell apart, because he was so disruptive.
I mean, he's already, and we're less than a month in. He's already pulled out the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
He's pulled out of elements of the UN.
Yeah.
He's made it very clear he might pull out the UN completely.
And he's the first NATO member, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I must do some research. I think it's the first NATO member to threaten military action against another NATO member.
Of course.
I don't think it's ever happened before.
Well, I mean,
Denmark,
how could it? I mean, until this man came along, it would be diplomatically and militarily insane. And so what I think we're staring down a number of barrels at the moment. There's a kind of range of them. But, one of them is we have to start making at least arrangements for what we do with the kind of liberal order with America almost off the pitch.
Yeah.
And that is very hard to envisage because, at the moment, right now, as we're recording this, two people who are having, if they're not physically together, but they will be metaphorically toasting each other, are Xi and Putin.
Yeah.
Because both of them have used hard power and, in Xi's case, soft power, and some soft power in Russia's case too, to advance their case around the world. And here's America. Yes, what he's doing is colonialist, but it's not colonial in the way that, let's say, the partition of America during the of Europe during the Cold War was. This is a great real estate opportunity.
It's opportunistic,
which is totally different. He's not saying I'm going to put. This is not like whatever you think of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? This is not that. It's not saying, right, we're going to go into these countries and turn them into democracies and everything will be fine. Didn't work out. But, it's saying we see a massive economic opportunity for America in this wasteland.
It's a guy who saw a long stretch of beach with beautiful Mediterranean waves crashing on that beach and thought to himself, my God, I see golf courses, I see casinos, I see shopping malls.
He's like Bob Hoskin in The Long Good Friday, thinking of, redeveloping docklands.
Yes, it's exactly that.
Except that there are all these, people living in absolutely abject circumstances who do need, and we've talked, you were talking the other day, I thought brilliantly about, how one could get together an international cartel of investors, under the auspices of, some multilateral organization to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinians.
So I thought, well, maybe if America was so invested in Palestine, in Gaza's future, it would deter Israel from bombing the shit out of it again, right? But I clearly wasn't thinking big enough, No,
I think you were thinking like a human, a thoughtful human being, a decent human being. Yeah. I mean, he talked about history a bit in his speech, which was hilarious. Yeah. Because anyone who's read more than one article about the Middle East ever knows that the whole point of this horrible, endless, bloody conflict that actually long predates the foundation of Israel between the various peoples of the area is all about land.
Yes.
And to say to the Palestinians, you got to go, is...
It's like saying to the Jews in Germany, you've got to go to Madagascar. It's the same. It's the same thing.
And also another thing that really is will long outlast Trump's presidency is that negotiations are all about confidence building, and there's not much trust at the moment given what's happened. But what he has done in a single intervention is make the already understandably suspicious Palestinians able to say, why should I ever trust anything America ever says again?
Totally. And he's also given all of the people who rightly or wrongly have described Israel's actions as a genocide. Right. He's given those people succor to their argument.
You see, here we get to a really interesting bit of it because as you know, I'm the only Zionist in the village. Let's part the genocide bit because that's another conversation. Yeah. But obviously, the horrors in the conflict have been appalling, unspeakable. Netanyahu was obviously. I mean, first of all, it's very significant that Netanyahu is the first head of government to visit Trump in presidency number 2. Because you remember who the first head of government last time was Theresa May, right? Hand-holding. Exactly. So there's been a bit of a change, right? But as we were saying before we started recording, you could see that Netanyahu he played it well because he's an old pro and he knows how to roll the punches. But there was a lot in it. I mean, yes, it's true that the extreme right that he needs for his coalition love this, but the last thing Israelis want is, for instance, US troops in Gaza.
Yeah.
They don't want any foreign troops in Gaza. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's the problem. Nor do they want suddenly to find that they have to police the reconstruction of Gaza by Trump Inc.
Yeah.
And it's being sold as if this is a massive concession to Israel. And of course, it is in the sense that it's zero concession to Palestinians and it doesn't harm Israel.
Yeah.
But actually, I know that a lot of Israelis are really not sure about this because they want security, right? That is the Jewish obsession, right? The Jewish state obsession. Yeah. And the more thoughtful of them, and that there are plenty of them, know that this is not a road to peace in the Middle East.
Well, it would be like Bill Clinton arriving in Belfast in 1985.
Let's move all the Catholics out to...
move everyone out.
Move everyone out.
They're all squabbling. It's going to be like this for 100 years. Decades of death, decades of destruction. Move them all out and we'll build... we'll have fantastic golf courses.
Yes, I mean... And also...
But I know that's just fucking ridiculous to say.
No, it isn't. But I mean,
that's exactly what he said.
Also, as someone who's sort of tried to at least see through the Israeli lens in this crisis, right? I have to say that if I was a Palestinian and I heard White House officials talking about temporary relocation, I think, is that right?
Really?
Is it?
How temporary? What, 100 years? 200 years?
How and where?
Yeah.
So I
when he said the phrase that gave it away to me was... Well, the exact phrase was something like long-term ownership position or something like this.
It was a long-term ownership position,
He's literally describing somebody taking out a 999-year lease on something.
As if, again, we come back to the language of real estate. Yeah. As if you go to this place, which is the most fought-over tiny little area in the whole world, arguably.
Yeah.
And you say, well... I can probably get this at a decent price.
Yeah.
And then I'll regenerate it, build some casinos, golf course, some nice beachfront residences. This is actually insanity. Yeah. And the problem is that it will be funny, but it's not because it's, as we started by saying, it's right in the middle of a very, very delicate ceasefire process. And I won't pretend, I'm very fearful now for that ceasefire.
Just before because obviously... We could rant all day long happily about this, but I'm just trying to work out what really is at the heart of his motivation. Is he thinking in terms of Mount Rushmore? Is he thinking the Louisiana Purchase, the purchase of Alaska, the adoption of Puerto Rico as a territory? He's going to take on Greenland. He's going to own the Gaza Strip. He's going to take over the Panama Canal. Is that what's driving him? Is this sense of his own personal greatness, do you think?
Well, always. But I think also what he is doing is, on the fly, creating an entirely different way of governing, which has some symmetries with the oligarchs of Russia.
Okay.
But it's a distinctively American form of it, which is the answer to everything is to be found in the world of business. You know, all you liberals, all you multilateral organization types, all you NGO types, all you journalists, you don't understand, right? Everything is about deals, okay? Everything. And I understand, Donald Trump, understand that the problem in Gaza, as everywhere, is that you've all got your doctrines and your obsessions and your books of history and your references to the 1940s, and it's all irrelevant because I'm going to come in with an offer you can't refuse. Yeah. And that is how he sees 21st century politics. And the problem with that is that it's both a complete bloody disaster, but it is also a new way of doing it. And so my initial thought was this is going to be a complete domestic disaster for him with his base because of it has the feel of a forever war. Yeah. But then I thought, no, because as you said, Matt, you know, the headlines are all about thinking out the box and, you know, big deals and everything like that. And low information voters will just see, well, what's the problem? He's trying to sort it out. All these liberals, they've been trying for decades to get somewhere, they've got nowhere. So I think it's very, very, I mean, it is, I wish I could, there is no silver lining in this. It is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Right. Well, on that grim note.
Sorry.
We're going to come back in a couple of minutes. Just before we go, I do want to encourage you to subscribe to The New European. It's ideas and conversations like this. We have them every week in print and online. And I think we're doing some fantastic progressive journalism. And if you believe in our values, you should support them. So subscribe. Come and join us.
It's a community.
It's a very fast growing community. And the price of entry is very, 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 very cheap. Some say too cheap.
Some say too cheap.
Our chairman says too cheap. I'm holding our chairman back by the shoulders every week.
The columns, but some say there are too many of them.
And you get a bottle of not vodka, tequila.
Tequila. While stocks,
great tequila. While stocks
the best tequila.
The best tequila.
I said, wow.
It's called El Rayo Plato Tequila. Pure tequila.
Beautiful tequila.
From Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico. Soon to be renamed America.
We're going to send it back to Mexico.
It's been thrown over the wall.
With the fentanyl.
Anyway, go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. There's a link in the show notes. See you in a minute. Welcome back, dear listeners. It's wonderful to be with you on this wonderful Thursday afternoon, evening. You and I both watched the first episode of this quite bizarre show on Channel 4 called
I'm a bigot, get me out of here. No, it's not. It's not called that.
No.
It's called Go Back Where You Came From.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, folks, the premise basically is, and it's been quite controversial, the premise is they've taken 6 Brits, 2 of a kind of liberal progressive persuasion, 4 out and out kind of like full on like immigrant haters,
fully leaded immigrant haters,
and they've taken them to
Mogadishu in Somalia and Raqqa in Syria,
right?
Which is funny.
And the point is, these people have to make their way back to the UK as if they were migrants, illegal migrants.
Because they have a lot more security than
they've got full-on security, body jackets,
Kevlar jackets,
security
everything,
guards,
thing,
guides, helicopters, and everything. They've got the full works, so they're not quite facing the same levels of peril as someone fleeing Mogadishu.
It's sort of the idea is, I suspect, and I haven't seen the whole series, but I gather that there are some redemptive cycles ahoy, so who knows? But as you say, Matt, it's been massively controversial because, and the trigger warnings at the start are, you know, pretty serious, and rightly so, because, you know, some of the things that the contestants or participants, or I'm not sure what the word is in a case like this, what they said are you know, incredible. And there's a I mean, take your pick, but there's a Welsh sports coach called Jess who's a lesbian, and as a beneficiary of the liberal pluralist society in which we live, you think she might have a certain measure of empathy for.
But, oh no.
However, her view is that all these immigrants, they are, quotes, rapists and paedophiles. Yeah. And you do think, first of all, what, all of them? Yeah. But secondly, do you not see the irony in what you're saying, Jess? Anyway, I'm sure you had a favourite thing as well.
Well, there was the little bald fella from, I don't know where he's from, but he's
David, the chef from Nottingham.
Yes, David, the chef. Now, and he, I think, is one of the redemptive characters.
He's on the beginning of a journey.
He is definitely on a journey, and this is why, by the way, I think it's great.
So actually. Do I. Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
There's been a lot of comment in the papers going how tawdry and they're sensationalising. Platforming
as if these views hadn't been. I mean, they're exactly everywhere you look.
I thought
mostly in Parliament nowadays.
Well done, Channel 4.
Yes,
I think it's actually been spun out of an Australian thing from 10 years ago.
Yeah,
but I thought, well done, Channel 4.
Can you imagine what that must have been like?
Yeah, bloody hell, Sheila.
Bloody hell. My God, look at him.
Push him back. But the point isn't about replicating the journey of a migrant. The point is to expose these people and their attitudes, some of which I find utterly fucking abhorrent.
Well, they are abhorrent,
to the reality of these people's situations. And this lad from Nottingham, this chef, who starts out
joking about muzzos.
Yeah, we call them muzzers, and all
land mining the mines around the
real
channel.
Horrible casual racism, of the worst kind. And he sits for, where's he? Is he in Syria or Mogadishu?
He goes to
He's
Syria.
In Syria. And he sits with this Syrian family. Who cook for them. He cooks for them.
He goes and buys some food and cooks for them. And they are very grateful.
It's a family of kids, and they live in absolute nothing,
with considerable grace.
And wonderful hospitality. Yeah. Offer them beds for the night. And he ends up crying his eyes out saying, why is no one looking out for them? Why is no one helping them? And that, to me, was the brilliance of the show. It wasn't about, can we put them through this game trial of getting back to Britain?
Yes.
It's about, no, mate, look at what their life is actually like and then understand why they want to leave.
I thought that is I agree with every single syllable of what you just said. I think that there were lots of things that were interesting to me. One of the things that was both striking and alarming was that what they were saying were the tropes that travel on social media.
Yeah.
Shithole countries, rapists and paedophiles, the things we see 1,000 times a day on X. Now, I don't know which of them, if any, are on X, but I don't think it matters. The point is that, as it were, the water supply of democracy has now been fully poisoned by this. Yeah. And so these were people who, they weren't skinheads, they weren't 1980s, late 70s NF types at all. They were just ordinary citizens, but spouting the same sort of thing.
With extreme views.
With very strong views, and the in some ways, the most dislikable of them all was a well-spoken posh type called Chloe.
Oh, God, I can't stand this woman.
She said, I really am an empathetic person. Now, it's an absolute iron law that anyone who says they're empathetic isn't, right?
I was just hoping she got left behind in Mogadishu.
I mean, she said, there were so many things she said, my views are just common sense. In 10 years' time, Britain's going to be full of people wearing burqas. Islam will have taken over. It really won't, right?
She's a vile individual.
She is. I think she's been on GB News a lot. She's a kind of rentable. But the moment where I thought, oh God, was when there were these desperate kids picking up refuse and plastic, because if you get enough, you can get a few cents, tuppence. Yeah. And she said, wow, they get an entrepreneurial kick out of it. It's like, no, Chloe, they don't. Yeah. They're just trying to get a bit of food so they don't starve.
She was just a posh, racist idiot.
Yeah, and it was deeply, deeply vile to see it. However, to return to your point, which is the point, I think, which is it a tawdry spectacle? Yup. Does it work? Yes. Yeah. And I think that we've talked about this a lot, and the importance of narrative and having to look at new and different and populist methods of getting across ideas and beliefs and stories. And, this is not worthy to hold a candle to Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which was a terrific drama. But it did illustrate the power of drama and narrative to really change things.
I think you're right. I'll tell you an example, a comparison at our own expense, really, or at the expense of kind of old-fashioned journalism, if you like. Do you remember at the back end of 2021 when 27 people died in the Channel on a rubber dinghy? We did 3 or 4 months later, we had a very thorough 10,000, I think it was 10,000 words.
Oh, I remember. I wasn't working
investigation,
for the European, but I remember it well. And it was a fantastic piece of journalism.
The front cover was the 27.
Yeah, no, it was
terrific. And the point of it was,
very powerful.
We spent months finding every single one of those poor people's story, where they came from, how they got to the Channel, what they were trying to come over for, and when you tell the human story, I still find it hard to talk about that piece without choking up, because they were just people you could absolutely relate to. People coming to try and join their husband, a family. The one that still gets me to this day, a couple of kids and a mother in Sangatte. And I remember the last photo, because they were photographed by, I think it was the Press Association, as part of a kind of colour story on, the camp of Sangatte. And they were photographed. This family that 2 or 3 days later drowned, happened to be photographed. And they were kind of scrambling they had a supermarket trolley that they'd got full of blankets and cardboard and stuff like this. And they were gathered around a fire and they were eating handouts. But they were a family like any family you would find in a working class street anywhere. Sorry. But they were trying to get over to, because they had relatives in the UK. Apologies. They, all 27 of them had a totally rational reason for being there, either from what they were escaping from or to what they were going to. But the failure in the piece, ultimately, it was a great piece of journalism, but the failure of the piece was you had to sit down and read it.
Yes.
And what's brilliant about this Channel 4 thing is it's entertaining as well. And that, I think, is the secret to really getting a message across.
Well,
is to entertain people as well.
Let me cheer you up a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think about this a lot, as you can imagine, post-Trump's second victory, right? Because there is a sort of counsel of despair, which is, there's just no point in doing normal journalism. It doesn't get through. Nobody reads it. No one listens to it. It's all just Joe Rogan and, UFC now, right?
Yeah.
And off we go to the apocalypse. I don't believe that, actually. I mean, I think that what we need to look for are, for want of a better phrase, gateway drugs. Because I think that podcasts, and I think that programs like this, and I see this particularly with young people, act as a bridge. So I agree with you. You had to, and I remember reading it and being seriously moved, and I kept it. And I said I wasn't working for the paper, so it's just a punter's eye view. This, I think, not everyone who watches it, but a lot of people who watch it will have at minimum pause for thought.
Yeah.
And maybe the next time they see something like that exercise whether it's a serious documentary or a piece of investigative journalism, they won't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is why we on the sort of liberal stroke, progressive stroke, whatever you want to call it, side of the street, we keep looking for a label, listeners, please offer a good word if you can find one, is we've got to lose our squeamishness about methods, right? It doesn't, yes, it's lurid, yes, it's crass, but what counts is what works. If it gets people, migration is going to continue to be one of the defining, if not the defining issue of democratic discourse in the next 20 years, right? And we just heard today, Thursday, that the climate crisis is even worse than we thought.
Yes.
Okay? And so climate refugees alone are going to be much greater. We're already talking about 150 million by 2040. I think it's going to be a lot more. This is going to be the defining issue of the next 20 years. So we need to get people talking about it in the pub in a way that isn't just rapists, paedophiles, and
Mate, I was thinking specifically about that lad, Dave from Nottingham, the chef. He will go back.
He'll go
back to the pub and he'll say, actually, do you know...
They're all scroungers, and they'll say, well, actually...
I've seen the different side. Right. And that's how evangelism works. And, you know, I think you're right. I think the resistance starts in small pockets.
It starts in small pockets, and it starts in unexpected vectors, which is... I think one of the problems of liberalism recently has been a tendency to be dead straight and limit itself to very, very serious vectors.
Yeah.
And actually, this is ultimately, in its message, quite a liberal project.
100%. Yeah.
And it's very odd to say that, but to me, it has the dabs of Ian Katz all over it, who's the head of programming.
Yes, right. The former Guardian guy.
Former deputy editor of The Guardian.
Yeah.
And editor of Newsnight, whose genius, long recognised, and he's a really impressive journalist and now programme maker, is precisely this: to find ways of getting progressive messages across in a way that's frankly fun, but also adhesive.
Totally. Look, I mean, if the
long may it continue.
If the point of media is to be the conveyor of a message, you've got to do it in a way that's interesting.
But it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
You can have your 3,000 word think piece or your massive investigation, right? And if we stop doing that, it is game over. Yeah. But we can. The way of getting people in is the key.
By the way, dear listeners, if you want to read that investigation into the 27, and it's a tough read.
Should resurface it on the site, Matt.
It's on the site now. So if you just Google the 27, use the number, the New European, it'll pop up.
Excellent.
And it's there to read. Really thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, you know what I'm going to say. Subscribe to the New European. It helps pay the bills. It helps us do that journalism that we've been talking about. And I think it makes a big difference. So subscribe, go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2 Mats. Claim your bottle of tequila while stocks last. Send in any comments.
Responsibly.
Drink irresponsibly for all I care. There's plenty. Do what you want with
Drink irresponsibly.
Consume our journalism with gusto.
He's just joking, kids.
Send in any feedback, any comments to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. Thanks as ever to our production team at Rethink Audio, led by the great Matt Hill. And until Sunday,
it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.